Okay, we've got here our finished rifle we were working on. We've got the stock has been modified as far as I think I'm going to be willing to take it at this point. The final net result here is a rifle as you see it, including the suppressor, scope, tripod, at about 7 pounds, 10.3 ounces, which in and of itself may not sound ultralight, but considering all the features that's including here, this rifle is 100% ready to go. Got my dope chart. It's basically ready to put a bullet in it and go hunting. So let's take the step back here and let's look at the stock. I don't have the action screws torqued down yet, so we can do that right now and actually show you the final weight of the stock as it came out. So you're obviously working with a firearm, always make sure that it's safe. This has been pre-cleared, but I'm going to set the magazine and the bolt off to the side. So now I've got my inch-pound torque wrench all ready to go, and I don't have these screws torqued in all the way. And as I mentioned in a previous video, these Tikkas, I believe the factory specs say something in the 40 to 45 inch-pound range as far as the torque settings for the action screws. However, I prefer a little bit more. I'm going to go to 60 on these. My bottom metal out. Stock is free, and the barrel action off to the side. Okay, so final stock weight here. Now I do have the addition of this little mini Arca rail, which, including the couple of bolts, is weighing in about 6.5 tenths, so between 6.5 and 7 tenths of an ounce. So we can subtract that off. I also have the weight of the recoil lug already in there. This is the titanium recoil lug we already installed in a previous video. So the final weight of this stock is 1 pound, 4.9 ounces. Okay, so pound 16 ounces, add 4.9, so we're at 20.9 ounces for this stock as you see it configured here. Now, what did we do? I took the factory butt recoil pad buttstock part off. That was just, we unscrewed those screws that were holding it in there. We cut the stock down by 1 inch, and then added in this foam piece that was just out of a yoga block. Just a really dense foam. It's actually going to have less give, honestly, than the factory limb saver pad did. And then I trimmed the end off, and I replaced it with another piece of foam. Both of these we used that 3M contact adhesive glue that I'd already tested, was not going to eat this kind of foam. Shaping it was just literally trimming it with a knife, and then I actually used sandpaper to get it smooth into the texture that I wanted. Same on the front end here. Now, for my cheek riser and grip extension, and I can explain in a bit why those are important to me in my shooting style. I opted to go for something a little bit more versatile, so I've actually added 2 strips of self-adhesive Velcro. I put the soft side down, that Velcroed, or that glued to the stock itself, and I put the rough edge side on the bottom of another piece of this yoga block foam. And so what that allows me to do is I can have different heights and thicknesses, I should say, of this foam, and I can just put a little bit of the Velcro on the back, and then I can adjust that height for whoever might be shooting that. Now I probably will do a similar thing eventually with this, with the recoil pad here. I'll probably trim this down to a minimum length of pull. Right now it's at about the factory length of pull, about 13.5 length of pull from your trigger to the end of the recoil pad, which is a tad long for a smaller frame shooter. I tend to gravitate towards having a little bit longer length of pull than you might otherwise think. It just gets me a little bit more comfortable, reach, especially if I have a longer or a shorter, trigger pull with an extended grip. Now, same thing on the grip. I can adjust the thickness of the grip by just swapping out different grip thicknesses. And there you have it. A tad under 21 ounces, including the ARCA and including my recoil lug. So, real briefly, why is this important? Why is this important? Why is my length of pull important? From a shooting perspective, I need to be able to get what I call proper sight alignment and a proper cheek weld. Now, when I have my scope on here, and this is obviously for demonstration purposes, just because we don't have to be pointing a rifle around, I can get my cheek lined up with the scope better if my cheek has something that is solid to rest it on. Now, every scope height and every set of rings is always going to be just a little bit different. And so if you have lower rings and a lower scope, this might be lower. If your rings are higher, if your scope is set higher for some reason, you might need a more of an extension. Oftentimes, your factory stocks will actually be lower in profile than this is. This one lines up fairly closely to the center line of the bore, which is going to be good. That's gonna make that line of recoil go straight into your shoulder, and it's gonna be less likely to torque that rifle up on recoil. Now, for the grip reach, if you want to call it that, the trigger reach here, I have fairly small hands. I like to be able to get my finger near the trigger in as perpendicular a fashion as possible. If my finger it's having to reach in a lot of factory grips, including this one, my trigger pull would look more like this. So I'd touch the tip of the trigger, and my finger would be at an angle coming in, trying to get a straight pull trigger, which is inevitably going to want to try and force that to the side. However, if my trigger pull is already angled 90 degrees, I can pull it straight into myself. It also allows me to take these 3 fingers in my shooting hand and snug them up into there, and I can isolate the movement. I can pull straight into my shoulder and isolate the movement in my trigger finger to just pulling straight on that trigger, instead of inadvertently torquing the stock left or right or up or down. I can isolate all of that movement with those 3 fingers so that my trigger pull is going to be straight back. This is another reason why I prefer these vertical grips. It's much more difficult to do that with your typical sporter style grip. You can't really get you have to grip the stock itself, almost choke it, in order to get the same amount of tension straight into your shoulder to isolate that trigger finger. Now, that's my shooting style. If you have your own and you shoot well, don't listen to me. But if you're starting out, you're learning how to shoot, try some of these things. See if they help you in getting your shooting and your accuracy and your fundamentals down just a little bit easier. Now, the other thing you'll see here on my stock is I've got my dope chart written. We can talk about this in a different video and how to make these dope charts. This allows me, with this particular scope, where I've got the dials, it's this one is set up in quarter MOA clicks. Having already shot this rifle with the load that I intend to shoot, I know its velocity. I know how much drop it has, how many clicks I need to adjust for the yardage, depending on how far I am away from the target. So I have all that information here on my dope chart, and everything else is ready to go. So putting this back together. You're going to line up the recoil lug with a little notch on these Tikkas and the forward end of the action itself. Now I like to set that down and just make sure it is fully nested in there. Now this carbon fiber Stocky stock is it's a very tight fit. There is no play whatsoever. Oftentimes if you go to put a stock in or out, you'll notice there's just a little bit of play. If there is, you want to have that play up back against that recoil lug as tight as possible when you actually go to tighten in your screws. Okay, so I've got my bottom metal, which in this case, like we discussed, I opted just for the factory bottom metal, just to save those couple of ounces. And again, that's sometimes is a bit of a tight fit. That nested right in there. I'm going to set that down for a second. So I've got my 2 titanium action screws. I'm going to take just a little dab of this thread locker, this Loctite thread locker. I'm going to put it on just a little piece of paper. And I can just put a little dab. I don't really want a lot. I just want enough just to, it'll resist movement on its own from vibrations during shooting or anything else. Bumping around in the truck. I'm just going to put it on just the tip, maybe the bottom 3 or 4 threads. And do that for both of these screws. Make sure you get off any excess. Now, why does this matter? Why do I care about making sure my action screws are perfect? I've got my torque where I want it, all these things, you know. It really just comes down to how reliable I can expect this rifle to be day in and day out. I don't want to have to go up against, go to take a shot at a game animal of some sort and miss because something in my rifle system had come loose. Be that my scope rings, my action screws, or anything else that caused a loss of my zero. I'm just going to get those snug down in there. Just where I feel like they're making contact. Let me give it one more wiggle there. Make sure it's good and snug and centered. And I'm going to start with that top action screw, the one closest to the muzzle. I'm just going to give just little turns. I'm not putting a lot, I'm just increasing the pressure each time. Make sure I don't have any additional play. Make sure everything is seated right before I really start to put some torque on here. All right, so now just by feel, I'm getting into about probably the 15 to 20 foot-pound range. This forward action screw seems to have bottomed out a little bit sooner than the rear action screw. I'm not getting as much movement there. So at this point, I'm about ready to just kind of click on through there. Like I said, I've got this set at 60 inch-pounds, not foot-pounds, 60 inch-pounds on this adjustable wrench. Excuse me. And last, you click. Okay, so my action screws are done, except as we've done in previous video, I'm going to take just a little bit of fingernail polish, a little dab. I'm going to put that at the edge of where the action screw meets the edge of the bottom metal here. And that's going to provide me a witness mark so that if that action screw moves, if something works its way loose, I should know it. I can see where it would have lined up with a little bit of fingernail polish and where it ends up if it does end up moving. So if I'm getting good groups in my shooting and all of a sudden something stops working, I all of a sudden start seeing my zero is shifted or something is no longer doing what it had been doing, I can start troubleshooting and I can start looking at things like, well, did my action screws back their way out a little bit? Did something adjust itself? Now I will say, you're going to want to take and go back and double check your zero. When I get to the range this afternoon, I'm going to verify that, in fact, nothing that I did in any of these modifications has affected my zero, has affected where my scope is sighted. And if something is off, if my groups are not, if the bullets aren't grouping where they had been, then I might need to adjust my action screw torque. As I said before, up to this point, I've had a metal bottom metal. I'm switching back to this plastic bottom metal. So there may be some change that's affecting in how this system is all going together. There's so many little minute vibrations and things going on in a rifle system like this. Even tiny changes can affect the outcome. So you want to double check that, and this sometimes can be chasing down one variable after another. I expect that a change like this in this particular rifle in this Tikka is probably not going to make a big change. These carbon fiber stocks are a lot more rigid. They don't allow for as much movement as the factory plastic stocks, for example. But if you want to test this principle, take a factory plastic Tikka stock and just adjust the action screw torque by 5 pounds either direction with the top or the bottom, and you're going to see your groups change dramatically. I mean, it's impressive how much just a tiny little change in something like that on a more flexible style of stock can change the harmonics of your rifle system. Okay, so those are going to dry. I've got my little witness marks. My bolt can go back in. My empty magazine. My little tripod. Now, I prefer to shoot with tripods. I find they give me just a little bit more versatility in the field. This particular one weighs about 6.5 ounces. I made this out of some other tripod parts and some carbon fiber poles. You know, you can roll your own. There are various options, obviously, on the market, but it does help, especially if you carry some sort of a rear rest, a bag, or otherwise, getting into various positions. This tripod setup, I've got some extensions that I can get up to as high as a standing high position for a stable shot, which can make a difference in various shooting positions. So shooting with the suppressor, obviously these kinds of things are going to add weight. You know, adding an 8-ounce suppressor on the end, adding 6.5 ounces to a tripod. But in the end, I get a rifle system that is more effective as a tool for the job that I need it to do. And that's the point. The ultimate goal for me in the shaving of this weight, getting down to what is essentially here now a 5-pound Tikka rifle. And if you look at just the bare rifle, if you took the Arca rail off, if you took the scope off and the rings off and the suppressor and the tripod, the bare rifle is exactly 5 pounds. Okay, so why did that matter? Because that allowed me to put these useful accessories on that allow me to be more functional in the field, be it the dialing turrets or quieter with the suppression, or more stability with the tripod. I can add those features and still be under 8 pounds. You'll find that there's many rifles on the market that you could go buy. The bare rifle alone will literally weigh more than this entire package. And there are even rifles that might be considered lightweight. Rifles in that 7.5, 7.75 pound range are very common. And that's great if that's what somebody wants to use. For me, I like to keep my whole package as lightweight as possible, because it means, you know, I can go farther faster when I'm in the field, and get less wear and tear on my bones and joints. So anyways, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below. Thank you.